All right. Okay. Hello? You hear me?
Yep, 1 second.
Okay. Oh, you muted me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Let the world know the truth. Expose the lies, study the bloodlines, the aboriginal finish. Let the world know the truth. Expose the lies, study the bloodlines, the aboriginal drive before the Spanish, the Dutch, and the British arrived. Saying we was from Africa and stole a birthright. That's triple, something that a dirty war would do. Claim your nationality of the land, you get screwed. So we studied your background, the treaties you wrote, fake as history. We ain't go up here on no boat. Frontin' like you indigenous to the land, you disgust me. The tomahawks back in our hands. It's getting ugly. You running around screaming black power. Cause sales to the truth, rivers filled with a bull and high hills. Native Americans, but hurt, can't tell. Cause they know damn well the relatives ain't real. Respect the aborigine, this land is ours. You know you all. You still a guest, motherfucker. I have one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling it. I have one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling it. House nigga, real nigga, fake nigga, feel nigga. My skin ain't black, what the deal, nigga? Salute on my else, but it's aborigines, owners of the land and every goddamn tree and every goddamn sea. Invaders ever cross, step foot on the land and you can step the fuck off. Breathe, you gon' make us swing the sacred tomahawk. Fucking around with us with that black constant. Fake bricks and slave ships, that's the reference. Rape with African blood, you gon' need more evidence. I'm American, Aboriginal, indigenous, Shibogi D is latest. That shit is rhetoric, stay woke. Aboriginal, get out. Your civil rights acts, all you can eat, big out. It's not Stockholm syndrome, mix gets out. Phoenix Moon got the antidote, get that shit out. Meanwhile, rapping about my birthright, fuck a freestyle. Teach each man, each woman, each child. Black race is really Indians indeed now. Man, they indeed now. Holly Dog, Title 18, G goes. Pilgrims get big gold, with Phoenix and Beast Mode. Bring them up big bows, out of the sleep mode. We ain't black, colors Africans or Negroes. One little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling it. I have one little, two little, three little Indian grandmas, but society keep killing them, telling it.
Osio, Sego, Halito, Kamawengapo, Chimachukwa, beloveds. I'm super excited. Got Dr. Fatu back. It's been maybe 3-4 years. I don't know. Cousin Tasha's here to help me host. This is super dope. We got our other doctor. Is there a doctor in the house? We got Dr. Fontaine just pulled up. I hope y'all excited. DNA is never going to be talked about the same, baby. Never going to be talked about the same. I got such a kick out of speaking with Dr. Fatu. I was like just getting real immature and just childlike and giddy. I almost did a clickbait title talking about Bobo and his son that and Garfield and paid for Phoenix Moon D. I was just so excited. What's up, y'all beautiful ones? Shout out cousin Davida, beloved Mr. Waldo, Mayan Chitty Macho. What's up, beloved? Pamela Hall. Hey, cousin Pam, cousin Liz Robinson, L. Austin. How y'all beautiful ones doing? How you doing? We got Dr. Fatu, Diara, our beloved cousin Tasha She, and we got Dr. Fontaine. Fatu, how are you, darling?
I am fine.
Yes, long time. What's it been, 3-4 years now?
Oh, I think About 4 years, maybe.
Right. So you've like developed so much. 1,001 people have sent you access to their DNA.
Mhm.
You've learned a lot since the last time.
Oh yeah.
Man, what you got for us? We excited. We excited. I know the internet ain't gonna be the same after this.
Oh yeah. Of course, more and more information. DNA only reconfirming more and more that we are the original people of the Americas. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself? For those that haven't seen the first video, I did share it out today so that people were able to catch up. You are an odontologist. Let them know what that's about, what it is that you've been practicing for all these years.
Actually, I'm an internist. I'm a physician. I'm a medical physician. I know why you said odontologist, because I came out with that post a few years ago about the dentition and how we have a unique dentition among our people here in the Americas, the tooth shoveling, the oral tori, and these kind of features, which is found in high preponderance among our people here compared to West Africans who tend not to have those findings. So I understand, but I'm actually an internist. I have a subspecialty as well. But this particular field, the reason why I'm big on doing the DNA, just researching my family and genealogy, all of those things were my passion. Partly because, well, the major reason is my particular background, as most of your viewer audience or listener audience, I should say, know. My father was Ghanaian. My mother was from North Carolina. Both of my parents are deceased. So I came from both backgrounds. Now I identify myself as someone from this land. That's, my mother's culture predominated in the home. But my questions, I didn't have really questions about where my father was from. That was very obvious, but I always had a burning desire to find out where my mom's people was from. And I got a chance because I grew up with my dad, and I also very close to my relatives, from both sides of my family. I got a chance to compare. And I could really see from the time I was young, even though we don't have all this available information that we have now, we didn't have it back then. I could see these were two different populations. I could just look at them, and it wasn't about complexion. I mean, literal features. I could see these were two different, and I will say this, quote unquote, Black people. These were two different people, and I saw that visually. And I could see there were different cultural behavior, a lot of things. And I just always, in my heart, in my deep heart, always knew my mother's people was different. So I was always digging and research. And I'm gonna tell you something. I intuitively knew my mother's people were American Indians. Now I have books on my shelf going back to when I was in Catholic school. And I left Catholic school at the age of 13, and then I went to high school, public high school. I have books in my library that I took from that Catholic school library. A couple of them I never returned. And one of them was the Mound Builders of the Southeast. Another one was Early American Indians. So I didn't grow up in a home where my mother really was acquainted with that part of her heritage. She really just knew herself as Black, Negro. She really was just rooted in her identity as it was given to her. I didn't really have that oral history that a lot of people have, unfortunately. She didn't identify herself as African. She never mentioned that word, but she also didn't understand her connection to the original people. It was just absent. What I will tell you is that there was something inside of me that always knew that. So I was digging, and to the point where I was doing so much reading about it. And again, this was before I even entered high school. So we're talking about, I was born 1970. So that gives you the time frame. So we didn't have access to all of this. My mother asked me one day, why do you keep reading about American Indians? And I didn't give her an answer. But the answer inside of me was, because I think these people are your people. So I had that kind of inner sense. And so now when, African Americans Ain't African came along, I started meeting people like yourself, Tasha, and I started doing more and more research. everything just kind of came together. But before I even joined the Facebook group, just based on my own genealogy, I had come to the conclusion that my family and the related families in the area of North Carolina where my mother was from, based on my genealogical research, had descended from those groups. And yes, they could have African admixtures, but that was not their primary identity. It was from the groups or the tribes that was there. And the reason why I had concluded that was because I kept hitting all these walls in my genealogical research. And it was a very distant cousin who said to me, be mindful that many of the surnames that our people have belonged to the tribes, even though they are European surnames. So you have to bear that in mind. And when he said that, that's when a light bulb went off, and I started taking a look at surnames and the association to the tribes, and then I started breaking through. So that's my introduction.
That is amazing. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So now, of course, this prompted you to do some sleuthing. Now, the last time we learned about the shoveling and some different things as far as the DNA, so many things have changed since then, right? Because I think after our first interview, my first interview with you, I think it was shortly thereafter that everybody's DNA changed, and you had all these people and they were losing their minds. Like, what do you mean I'm this and that? I thought I was 80% Italian, and they had this really big shift. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that was between both companies, like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. People were flipping out because their estimates changed. And it was at that point that we met one of our, in the battle groups. I know you remember when we used to be in the battle groups, Brother Emil. Emil is from the Congo. He lives in Europe. He lives in Great Britain now.
Oh, yes.
And when his estimates changed, now this brother has 2 parents from the Congo, 4 great-grandparents from the Congo, and 8 great-grandparents from the Congo, and it completely shifted his estimates and sent him all over the place. He had parts in the Caribbean, parts in Mexico, and the Yucatan Peninsula, all these different places. It completely threw him off. And this is where he became friends with Tasha and I, and he took a liking to this term, no grandma killers. So he went from someone that debated us all the time to saying, wait a minute, this DNA means something else. And I don't like the Pan-Africanists who aren't really even for the causes, for Africa to prosper. He said the Pan-Africanists are using DNA against the American Indians to put further confusion in.
Absolutely.
And this is what he said. And he didn't want to participate in that. He said that would make me a grandma killer. And, he lost a lot of friends after that, but gained some family. You see what I'm saying? Shout out to Brother Emil. I would love for him to pull up one of these days, especially because this would give him clarity too, as well. So we're just going to let you go. I want to say hi to Tasha and Dr. Fontaine really quick. I'm sure they want to say hi to you as well.
Hi, Tasha.
Hey, Fatu, how you doing?
I'm good. I've learned so much from Tasha T as well. A big contributor to my learning.
Yes. So glad to hear that. Well, Fatu, we're going to give you the floor, darling. What you got for us? Let's break it down. You take as much time as you need. We're going to walk it down.
All right. Well, one of the things that I first of all, let me just put out a disclaimer. I am not a geneticist, okay? Reason why I got into DNA, okay, after I started getting into our people being American Indian, because the records was clearly showing that we were here, okay, but that wasn't lining up with the DNA.
Yeah.
I thought someone said something. Okay, that wasn't lining up with the DNA. So I had questions, okay, and my questions the average person wasn't able to answer them. Like, why is this so and so? Why do we have Nigerian DNA? Why do we have Ghanaian DNA? What's up with this Angola, Congo, or Congo, Cameroon, depending on the test? What's up with this DNA? And not only that, I was looking at results of other people from other communities, races, ethnicities, and their DNA more or less was lining up with their origins, but something was going on with us. So I started studying it, and I learned a lot from Tyrone Lewis Cannon. A lot of you guys have heard of him, and he's of Creek heritage. His origins are from Alabama, and he particularly studies our DNA. So I started learning things from him, Toriano Obishango L, and different people well versed on the history. Well, with that said, one of the things that I can tell your audience is that not only is there a little bit of, or a lot, or misinformation when it comes to how they categorize our DNA in the African category, I can tell you that there is a lot of hiding when it comes to our European lineage as well. And I've come to discover that a little bit more recently, because what happens is that the paradigm that's constantly put out to our people is that we come from enslaved West Africans, and the European admixture is British or British descendant slave masters. And that's what we are. End of the story. So with that being said, that means that the European DNA would primarily have to show a Northwestern or Northern European type of pattern. A light bulb started going off on my head when I first did my mother's ancestry DNA years ago. Now, I didn't get a chance to do her 23andMe, so the only thing I have on her is the ancestry DNA. And I saw a decent amount of Eastern European. And then they did an update, and the Eastern European and the Portuguese disappeared. What happened to it? Okay. So then I started looking at third-party DNA testing, and that's something that many of our people, if you participate with DNA, you have to become comfortable doing third-party DNA testing. That's where you see more of the truth. None of it is 100% true, okay, because these are computer-generated programs, which means that they are set by these geneticists with a bias, meaning that what they do is when they are creating these computer generated models where you input your genetic information, which is downloaded, okay, and you input it into these programs, if they've already determined that the bulk of your DNA, which they term African, is going to be West African or Nigerian, then it automatically auto assigns a good portion of your DNA to Nigerian. It doesn't mean it's Nigerian. It was programmed to recognize your DNA, which they don't know what it is, right, as Nigerian. You have to understand that. So that's what happens with us. Now, I'm in a minute or a few minutes, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. And I showed this to you earlier, Phoenix, okay, with the 23andMe, which has the different confidence levels, where you have something called speculative at 50%. Most people just get their results and keep it moving. They don't understand that they can look at their results at a 50% confidence level, which is the level that it's reported, by the way. And then you can move it to 70%, and then you can move it to almost 100% confidence level, which is at the 90% confidence level. And you will see the changes. So seeing is believing. So I'm going to show you that. So I started looking at third-party testing companies like GenMatch, their sequencing. I'm going to show the audience all of these things when I share my screen. And one of the things that I started to see was that, let's just take the European DNA that pretty much we all have. You will see Iberian DNA. You will see Eastern Mediterranean DNA. which is in the area of Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. You will see DNA from the Red Sea. Now, this is what I see in pretty much all of us who descend from the Eastern Woodland tribes. You will see a small portion of North African DNA. You will see Northeast African DNA. Of course, you will have the Asian DNA and a type of Asian DNA, which they call Native American, which is a type of Asian DNA. And I need to emphasize that, which they term Native American. I'll see a little bit of South Asian DNA, okay? And that's what we typically see. And you see also Baltic. You see Balkan, that's the area around Greece. And you have different programs where you can look at older DNA. They have an archaeogenetic section where they have the different bones from prehistoric Europe during the different periods, Neolithic Europe, Mesolithic Europe, and you can see that a lot of our people match that as well. So the question becomes, why aren't those results being shown with Ancestry or 23andMe? So now when Ancestry does its updates, and I'm very sure your listening audience will notice that all of a sudden, for one time, you might get this 1% Spanish, you might get this 1% Greece, 1% Sardinian, then it disappears. Then you might have Native American, then it disappears. You know, let me just say this. When it disappears, it doesn't mean it was false. It just means that the company reserves the right to change their criteria for what they deem should be reported. So when years ago, Ancestry was still rather new on the scene and a lot of our people was participating, so many of our people were getting small amount of Native American. They'll just say 1% Native American. Now, we're not Native Americans, okay? We're indigenous. However, the reason why I'm pointing this out was they changed and they did an update. So now the criteria became different. You have to actually have more Native American DNA before they actually assign it to you. So many people who had 1% Native, and that was so many of our people, pardon me, all of a sudden now that didn't show up. The Eastern European my mother had no longer was there, and it wasn't even a small amount. The Iberian DNA from Portugal disappeared. Then my uncle had South Asian that appeared. Then that disappeared. And I realized they had to do that because the question becomes, if they showed all these results and didn't do an update and they disappeared and you kept looking at that, that would make the average person question, where did these results come from if we're just merely West African slaves, perhaps mixed with some rape blood from British slave masters? Because you have to explain the tiny Asian DNA markers, the Filipino DNA markers, the Iberian DNA markers, the small amount of Italian, Greek, all these DNA markers, Eastern European DNA markers, and really, I have to tell you, it's really DNA markers from all over the planet, and that is extremely unique to people who descend from the Eastern Woodlands. And a little bit of the Caribbean, but I would say particularly the people that come out of North America. So looking at the DNA is very helpful and educational, because even in the effort to hide or confuse our people, we still have a pattern. And those are the patterns that I've noticed. And I'm not the only one that has noticed this. So it'll show up on Jed Matches Western. So let me stop talking and let me just start illustrating. Hold on. Okay.
And Dr. Fatu, I don't mean to jump in, but there's like a beeping sound in the background. I know some people might have headphones on. They might, be listening. I don't know if you can do anything about the beep.
You know what? It sounds like a little bird chirping.
Yeah.
That's my alarm. Unfortunately, I can't turn that off.
Oh, okay.
I hope it's not too disturbing. Oh, hold on. Alrighty. Okay, Chrome, hold on. Alrighty. I'm going to go to my uncle's, or, you know, I'll go to a cousin of mine. Okay, this is my cousin. She's both of her parents are from the United States, indigenous. Okay, so she's not half and half like me. And this is what typically your listening audience will see. Okay, and so this is very typical for someone who just is from North America, Eastern Woodland descended. Okay,
Dr. Fatu, I don't think we can see it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, you have to press the yeah, there you go.
Yes, ma'am. We see it now.
You see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So this is my cousin, and I was, you know, she's indigenous to this land and of Eastern Woodland background, and this is what many of our people. This is very typical of results. Okay, the variations could vary, but this is very typical. So as you can see here, they assigned 77.5% of her DNA to sub-Saharan African, 20% European. This is classic. And then, of course, you have the East Asian Indigenous American, and she has the Southeast Asian and, you know, a little bit of North Asian, and you have West Asian and North Africa here. Okay. All right. So this is what I want to show. Hold on. Okay, hold on. The screen is very important. Right here, you go to DNA painting, view report. Okay. And you see right here, this for some reason, I find that I cannot do this on a telephone. If someone has a smartphone, this feature always seems to be available on desktops or laptops. So anyway, you go to the confidence level, and this is important because what is reported is at speculative. And I want your audience to pay attention. Speculative. Okay? Now, this is what happens when we are very certain of the results. We're going to click it right here at 90%. Now, let's look at the results. What do you have here? That Nigerian went from 25% down to 5%. And I want your audience to pay attention. Let me go click it again. 25, 5. Ghanaian, Liberian, Sierra Leone went down to 2.9%. And then you have this category called Broad West African. What's that? They can't even categorize it. Now, this is what I would like to show. At 90%, the European and the Asian didn't even change that much, very minimally. But look how your categories of African changed, where a good portion of your African, they couldn't even categorize it. So that means they are assigning you categories, and most of what they are assigning you hasn't even been categorized. So that's what I wanted to explain to your audience. So if you don't have this kind of understanding, you see this huge Nigerian. Let me go back up to speculative. So speculative, they were speculating here. They were speculating with the Native American, Asian, all of that. We go up to near 100%, 90% conservative, where they're confident. They're very confident that that's what they were looking at, but they lost confidence about these. Okay. So, in the past, when we had this interview, Phoenix, I mentioned to you that there's something called ancestral informative markers. And that's what we share with continental Africans. Okay. But they're not going to tell you that that we have a category unto ourselves. So it's important to understand these things are generated by computers. It's good to look at it, but you have to have an understanding of what you're looking at and the weakness of it. Now, with Tyrone Lewis Cannon, he places a lot of emphasis on this region, okay, when it comes to our people from North America. And the reason why is because this right here took place very early on in our history, okay? These were the earliest seafarers that came and intermixed with us. And there's a process called introgression. That's when you have two different populations that've been in each other's presence for so long that they've intermixed, that the incoming group DNA, that group's signature DNA becomes embedded into our DNA, that it literally becomes a part of our DNA. So even with me, I have that. I have this at 1.1%. And 50% of my genetics is from the African continent, and it's 100% African. Because it's not easily mixed out, because this took place over a long period of time. Hold on. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, this is a Ghanaian relative of mine. And as you can see, hold on. They were able, because they pretty much have DNA at this point from all over the planet. They were able to localize the tribes that he's from, because they simply have the sequences from all over the planet. It's not rocket science. Now, this is what I wanted to show your audience, because, I said this to Phoenix earlier. Two things can be, hold on, correct. It's not, because over the years, I've heard people say the transatlantic slave trade wasn't true, yeah. No, it was true. And you have more Africans participating in these DNA studies. So it's not as if we can't prove they have relatives, particularly coastal Africans. So some of his lineage comes from the coastal tribes of Ghana. So if you look here, and these will be relatives, you will see, Let's take Mexico. Okay. These are people from Mexico that he's related to. All right. People from, we actually share a relative from Jamaica, a few relatives from Jamaica. Okay. And I know that because the two of us are related to these individuals. So I know that's not coming from my mother's side. Okay. So let's be clear. There was an African slave trade. It wasn't a huge amount that came into North America. It wasn't a huge amount that went into Jamaica, but the African slave trade occurred. Now, Mexicans do not stop being Mexican because they have African ancestors that came in from the slave trade. We don't stop being indigenous because of it as well. Okay, and that's what I wanted to say. Does anybody have any questions?
No, you're doing a great job. And people in the chat, they seem to understand what you're saying and explaining with the breakdowns. Is there a way to show? Okay, I remember a couple years ago, you were breaking down to me that when you looked at the breakdown of your DNA, and a couple of other people had agreed with you, you do not match with Africans. You were matching with people from the East Coast, North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina. Is there a way that you can show that today?
I'm sorry. I was answering a text. Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry, Tasha.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I was saying, I remember a few years ago, you were telling me about the DNA test and how that you would click on the breakdowns. Mm-hmm. And when they actually were showing the people that you connected to, you were connecting mostly to people from the Eastern Woodlands, from North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really showing you connecting directly to a lot of Africans.
Oh, so okay.
Show that? Yeah.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Back then, you didn't have Africans participating. And what I noticed, now see, back then I was looking at my uncle's, my mom's brother, her full brother's DNA. And so far he has no relatives. But that's contingent on West Africans participating, because actually my Ghanaian relative, he has relatives in North America, as well as the Caribbean and Mexico. So again, that's contingent. Back then, that was the disadvantage of not having more continental Africans participate. But we are starting to match some of them, some of us. Now it depends, because everybody's family story is different. Some of us have ancestors that were enslaved. Okay, and some of us have ancestors who were enslaved, but primarily indigenous. Some of us have ancestors that were enslaved, that were indigenous, but intermixed with some African slaves. Some people come from lines where they really weren't enslaved. So speaking for my mother's family, I will tell you that she came from both, but even her enslaved ancestors didn't do too much intermixing with others. Just the region, I guess it was dependent on the region that they were in. And there's certain patterns that I see that, and I'll show that as well. There are certain patterns. What happens, a lot of our people that have Caribbean, because a lot of the imports that came in from the Caribbean, all right? And some of this Nigerian that they assigned to our people And again, this depends on the test, because if you look at my heritage, you will see my heritage, everything that falls under, even Ghanaian, they put under Nigerian, Jamaican, they put under Nigerian, and Alabama and Oklahoma, African Americans, all of that, they automatically auto-assign to Nigeria. So Nigeria doesn't always mean literally Nigeria. It is just what they term our people's DNA in the diaspora. You understand? So again, it depends on the test. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Oh, no, you answered it well.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat. Someone said, Doctor, have you been looking into hematology also?
Not really.
Okay.
You know, I know that, just speaking from my clinical experience, I know that there's a type of leukemia. I'm got a little brain fog here, that primarily is seen. Is it the HTLV? There's a type of leukemia that we see primarily. Primarily among Caribbean people. And it's like a T-cell leukemia. We also know there's this type of diabetes that we used to call Brooklyn diabetes when I was in training. It's an aggressive form of diabetes. It's a type 2 diabetes, and I've seen this. And it converts to almost really like a type 1, where they become insulin dependent and can go into ketoacidosis. We see that in a subset of people from the Caribbean. So all of these things, to me, it's very suggestive that the people were there for some time, that they've developed certain types of illnesses peculiar to themselves. That's not coming from people who were recently transported from someplace else. I mean, but I'm not a hematologist.
Okay, and someone asked, which tool is that with the estimated sequences that you were using?
Oh, that is called the confidence. And you could switch it. It's automatically, your results with 23andMe they're automatically reported at a 50% confidence level. But you can switch it to 90%, and there you will see that your European and Asian Native American barely changes, but you will have a huge change in the percentages of your Nigerian, Congo, Ghanaian, all of those things go down.
Okay, and then there's another question. Which genes identify us as indigenous? I don't remember hearing it. This is someone asked.
Put it this way, what they're testing, they're not going to tell you, me, or anyone else that we're indigenous, but we have a pattern. And part of that pattern involves understanding our ancient history, pre-Columbian history, what was happening around Columbus, what was happening after Columbus. And all of that DNA is inside of us. And all together shows that we were here. We are indigenous, absolutely. But they're not going to tell you this DNA is DNA. They have not categorized an aspect of our DNA and said this is indigenous. Now that's giving it away.
Now, I remember some years ago, you found an article that was breaking down the DNA of some of the Wampanoag, I believe, that were,
Oh, yes.
and I think they were enslaved in Barbados or Bahamas, someplace in the
Yes,
Caribbean. Can you speak on that
absolutely.
today?
Yes. There's the Pequot, the descendants of the Pequot Indians who were taken to St. David's Island, which is off of Bermuda. And they did genetic studies. As a matter of fact, it was that study that influenced me to take a look at the teeth, because when they did the genetic breakdown of those descendants who knew by oral history that they were American Indian descendants of the Pequot who were taken there, if you looked at the results of the genetic study, it was overwhelmingly labeled African, just like ours, with a small percentage of native DNA, which is really a form of Asian DNA, and some percentage of European. But what happened was that the World Health Organization sent a team of dentists, and they took a look at the teeth of the population, particularly the children, and they saw overwhelming tooth shoveling, which is a cupping of the incisors, which is the top two teeth in the top of the head and the bottom teeth in the bottom, right underneath of the jaw. And their conclusion was that the oral history, despite the genetic findings, had to be true because that is a signature of Amerindian lineage. And we have the same findings in our mouth.
Right. I remember when you went into that with the shoveling and the moles, and people lost their minds.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely remember that one.
Yeah, at first I was not looking at the teeth. I was looking at the oral tori, because that was brought to my attention by a patient of mine from Jamaica. And I was doing a physical examination on her. And when I looked into her mouth, she made it a point to the bone, a round ball in the roof of her mouth at the upper palate. And she made it a point to tell me that her dentist said that was indicative of her Arawak heritage. And she didn't know what it was called. Now, after that, I started just taking a look in my patient's mouth. A good portion of them are Caribbean. And I noticed like every other one had it, particularly the women. And it didn't matter. It wasn't a particular phenotype. It didn't matter if they were dark, light. I mean, they were just your bread and butter Caribbean women walking up and down in a good portion. So when I went to the dentist and he was doing my x-rays and I found it a little painful, he said to me, "Oh, it's painful because of your tori." And I said, "My what?" So he took a mirror and he showed me I had one in the roof of my mouth that I never paid attention to. And I started reading about it. And it is also a feature of Amerindian or Asian lineage. And of course, I took a look at my mother's. My mother had the same findings, so I inherited from her. And then I looked in my cousin's mouth. My mom, one of my mom's sister's daughters, and she had it. So evidently, and then my mom's cousins all have it. So it's from my mom. Absolutely.
Okay. So we have another question from the good brother Ishmael Bey. He asks, does the doctor know that 23andMe does not compare any North American Indian tribes, on the charts?
Yeah, when you look at the reference populations, it seems to be more Meso American and South American. Yeah, when you look at the populations. But again, who are those people? They're still primarily Asian descendants. The significance of that DNA, again, is put it this way. It just shows we were here when they migrated and intermixed with us. We are not the same. And if you look at their DNA, by the way, they have tiny percentages of Nigerian, Congolese, and that DNA as well.
Yeah, I remember talking to people at a powwow one time, and they had their DNA results. Now, these are full-fledged enrolled members, and it didn't matter what color the person is. They all had a large percentage of Nigerian and Cameroonian DNA show up on their results, but they didn't have oral history of having Africans in their bloodline. And I remember we spoke about that when you mentioned the Pequot results, and it seems like they're categorizing the woodland DNA with those West African nations.
Right.
And then those people aren't getting results. They're not getting cousin matches with people from those areas either. So that's a telling sign right there of what you're saying is exactly true.
That's right. So if you give me a second, I'm looking up something I would like to show your audience.
After that, Dr. Fatu, I had a question as well.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead and ask me.
Oh, one of the things I was wondering is, you know, I looking at this like sociologically, right? I was wondering, do you think ancestry still rooted in the land bridge theory? I know certain theorists and everything have refuted that theory. So I was wondering, do you think that still really undergirds how they code their confidence levels, the confidence intervals that you were referencing?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the fact that they were quite confident with the Asian and the European, which didn't change, and the fact that ours changed is, to me, just them being disingenuous about the fact that we clearly have our own DNA, which they aren't labeling. And they are forcing us to have, and they are exaggerating the African percentages. Because as you can see, once you went up to 90% confidence, the African percentages actually went down, and then this undefined category went up.
Right, and that confidence level is very telling. So we already know, right? If we took it up to 95% confidence interval, that that undisclosed or unknown would probably increase even more because
exactly.
Right, got it. I'm tracking.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna have it now. 23andMe now, they keep changing and removing things, okay? And I'm going to show you this. All right, so hold on. Let me share this screen. Okay. Can you see that screen? It says Ancestry at 23andMe, Sheridan's Global Origins.
No, I don't see it.
Wait, hold on. You don't see it? Can you see it?
No.
No. Hold on.
Did you share the screen? You might have to remember last time you had to press something else.
Because on the bottom it says stop screen, which, man, I would love to show this to your audience here. You see it now?
Yeah, it's loading now.
All righty. Okay. All right. So this was back in 2010. And this was something called global similarity. It was a feature in 23andMe that they no longer have. Okay. Now, this is a so-called African-American participant. And I'm going to show you something. She participated in 23andMe back then, and they had the global similarity. And I can see why they got rid of it. Because when you look at the global similarity, who she's closest to genetically, this is what popped up. All right. Northern Europeans, Southern Europeans, Northern Africans, Near Easterners, Southern Africans, East Africans, then West Africans. So please tell me, how is it that the people that we allegedly come from is down here in terms of genetic closeness? You see my point? Now, there was something here I just wanted to point out.
That makes sense.
Okay. Sheridan, that's the name of the young lady. Sheridan immediately notices that her highest similarity is with Northern Europeans. This isn't that surprising given that her maternal haplogroup indicates probable European ancestry. Her mitochondrial DNA was H, so we know that at some point her maternal ancestress was a European woman. So she has a decent amount of European DNA, some of us do. But she sees that she is also highly similar to African populations, especially Northern Africans. How so? How is this? Okay, now I'm going to, in a few, show you. Now, this is what I wanted to, this is what I was looking for. Sheridan's green marker falls near the top of the African region. And zooming in further shows her squarely in the Mozambique population in Northern Africa. This is what I really want you to pay attention to, because many of our people from North America, actually, when you use other third-party tests, these people here, the Mozambique population, is who many of us are genetically similar to. Okay, we're not the same as them. Hear me out. But at some point in pre-Columbian times, they came here, or perhaps we also went over there as well, which I think we did. There was intermixture between our people and their people. Okay. So as you can see, they had to get rid of this. And I will also tell you, when you look at third-party testing, you will also see that we have a decent amount of Southern European DNA as well. And that's not new. Okay? From Italy, Spain, and the like. Greece, and it's not new. Mozambique, a Northern African population. So they had to get rid of this because this does not fit in line with the history. I can see why they got rid of this, because I can guarantee you she wasn't the only one showing something similar to this. All right. So there are other tests that has something similar to this sort of similarity, and I will show you. Okay, so let me get out of that. Hold on. Okay, you no longer see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So now that allows me to go somewhere else. Hold on a minute. And this is what I want to show your audience. Hold on. There's another third-party test. And for people who are interested in doing their DNA studies, I encourage participating in these different DNA studies, because the more you participate, the more you get accustomed to recognizing the patterns, okay? So there's a certain type of pattern that I see with our people, all right? And there's, of course, there's variation. Some people have more of one thing than another, but pretty much we share similar traits, and we basically have the world in us. What happens is that people end up wrongfully identifying with the components that came in and mixed with us. But all these people came and mixed with us. Hold on. Okay, so let me sign into this. Oh man, this says our site will be back online tomorrow. Oh man, something really good. They're doing an update at that site, so can't do that. Hold on. All righty. All right, no problem. I'm gonna show you some gem match stuff. No problem.
Now, someone asked in the chat, while they need Jazz asks, can you explain how we can find the oral tori in our mouths?
Well, oral tori is simply bony protrusions that you can see in the upper palate being the roof of your mouth. And it's very obvious if you open up your mouth and look in the roof, if you see any kind of bony protrusion and it's not completely flat, that's a tori. Now, what I've noticed is that people from the Caribbean, and this is just from looking at mouths all the time, people from the Caribbean tend to have round tori. People from North America tend to have long, elongated tori in the roof, unless they are from like areas like South Carolina where they have a significant amount of Caribbean lineage. Then sometimes I'll see round tori on people like that. But the thing that's a little more unique to people from North America is that we have submandibular tori, something that I rarely see on Caribbean people, and that would be in the bottom of your mouth, the bony protrusions inside on the bottom underneath your tongue. I find that people from North America tend to have those as opposed to the Caribbean people. Hold on. So basically, I'm about to share the screen here. I'm just uploading something here. This is alrighty. Hold on here. Let me share my screen. Okay. Let me know when you see it.
Not just yet, Doc. We don't see it.
Oh, okay. I wonder if it's some sort of.
You know while you're troubleshooting that and everything, Doc. One thing that I was reminiscing with one of our Urban Indian Heritage Society members with Junior about was the bony structure that you were discussing right underneath the tongue. I just had an aha moment. I was like, wow, I had that as well. And, I would have to watch back in the day because depending on, how I would motion my tongue, sometimes, the saliva would come out and everything, right? Not to be so descriptive, but, Junior and I was discussing, we was like, back in the day, we used to call it gleeking. And if you had somebody that you weren't too fond of, like you could just like gleek on it, like, oh no, you gleeked on me. So we just had a fun trip down memory lane discussing that, but not really knowing that that's something that is really isolated, as you said, to folks here in North America.
Absolutely. Do you guys see the screen?
No, ma'am, not just yet.
No.
What's going on?
And peace, everyone.
Peace, David. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. Hope everyone else is doing well.
Let me see if I could try this again.
Peace, David.
Okay, hold on. All right, hold on. Is it normally something that's delayed with the screen sharing? Like, is it something that happens automatic? I'm still a little new to this.
Yeah, sometimes it is delayed, but then other times it goes right to it. So
yeah. Okay, so maybe I just need to, I'll be a little patient and then we can. Oh, hold on. Let me try this again. In the meantime, while I'm doing this, anybody has any kind of questions? Let me explain what I'm looking for. I'm getting ready. The site that I wanted to put up was sequencing, but they're doing some sort of site maintenance and it won't be back on until tomorrow. So I can't use sequencing, but that's fine. There's so many other things I can go to. I wanted to show GEDmatch, which is a third-party site. Anybody that I'm sure a lot of your listening audience heard about it. And you download your data, you create a GEDmatch kit, and then there's different programs. Well, we have certain features or characteristics that I wanted to show. Hold on.
Yes, someone had a question about, based on your studies, would you conclude that the Lenape tribe are indigenous to the Americas? Now, there's people saying that the Lenape came from Asia and migrated and all that. And then there's other people saying Lenape has always been here. So there's someone's asking you, what's your opinion on that?
I can't answer a question like that. I will tell you this. Based on what I'm seeing from many people from different types of tribes who descend from the Eastern Woodland, I would say that the DNA evidence shows that we were here a very long time, and many of us show the DNA of the earliest seafarers on the planet. And we contain the Tyrone Lewis Cannon did a study, his own study, and I see this just looking at samples all the time, that it is very unlikely to see a so-called African American from North America who does not have Austronesian markers, which would be the Southeast Asian markers with a little bit of South Asian, but primarily Southeast Asian. It is very, and now the question is, why do we keep going back to that? Because if they were the earliest seafarers on this planet, okay, whose DNA was different from ours, and we, almost 90% of us, possess those DNA markers, and they had to visit us on when our forefathers were on the Pacific Rim, whether it was in the California area or in the Peru, Chile area of South America. If almost 90% of us possess those markers, then we had to be in this hemisphere when they came visiting. So I can't, that's at least for the DNA test that we're working with, that's as ancient as it gets. So, arguing who wasn't here, who was here, I mean, at this stage of the game, we all have ancestors that migrated here and mixed in. The fact that we even have their markers, they're not indigenous to this land. They came in and mixed with us. So basically what I'm saying, I'm not defining our people by the people that mixed in with us. I'm saying if we're working backwards, we're looking at all the people who came here. And if you look at the timeline, we have the DNA of the earliest visitors. So we had to be here when the earliest visitors came. I know I'm not really answering the question 100%, but what I'm saying is, I think that, you guys, this tribe is not indigenous. How can you have such a discussion if they possess the markers? Because, I'm looking at people like my uncle. He has tiny Manchurian and Mongolian DNA. He's not Manchurian and Mongolian. So that means he had to have ancestors that migrated out of Canada and came down out of Asia. So, I don't know particular Lenape history, but they are an Algonquian people when I last checked. And I know that some of my ancestral tribes were Algonquian. So, we have a similar type of ancestry. So I would imagine that I would see similar findings if I were to take a look at their DNA. Not all of our forefathers were ancient to this land. We have a combination of people that were here and people that came in on us. Why would anyone focus on that anyway? I'm just curious.
No idea. Yeah, I think that was an interesting question.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in the chat, they're fascinated about the oral tori, and they want to see pictures of what it looked like.
Oh man. Okay. All right. So let me.
You showed years ago. You had all those pictures from different people.
Yeah. I still have it. I never got rid of that. Post. Hold on. Let me put up. All right. It's palatal tori. All righty.
And they're asking about the balls under your tongue too.
Yeah, that's called submandibular tori. Okay, so let me go here to you guys. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay, so I hope this, I'll be patient. Please tell me you see it. This thing is acting up.
Not yet.
Okay, I think it will show. I think I need to be patient because what happened was with the other one. So in the meantime, for those of your listening audience, all you have to do is go to Google, put in the web search palatal tauride, PALATAL, palatal tauride, TORI pics, so you can see it. Because somehow or another, I don't know why there's a delay with my screen sharing. I'm doing all the right things. Phoenix and I practiced this earlier, so there would be no hesitancy or confusion on my side on how to use this.
Okay. I think you have to end your last share first and then start to share.
Okay, let me go back.
Try that again.
Okay, hold on. Okay, maybe you said wait, hold on. All right, because I thought I ended the last share. And still nothing shows.
No, it's still not showing.
Oh man. Oh man.
Let me see if I can. Let me see what's going on. I'm gonna try it on my end to see what's going on.
Okay.
All right, can y'all see my screen? See, I don't think it's working at all.
No.
No. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and then you try to share because maybe it might jiggle something on your end.
Yeah, this is. Well, look, I will tell you what I was trying to show. Okay, but I know it's nice to see results. Okay, what I was showing, I just used my mother's kit, but there's certain things we have in common, regardless. Okay, whether it's your kit number, my mother's kit number. Okay, anyone who descends from the Eastern Woodlanders. If you look at Eurogenes 13, and I wish people could see it, you would see something called North Atlantic, Baltic, West Mediterranean, West Asian, East Mediterranean, Red Sea, South Asian, East Asian. Then you have the Siberian, Amerindian, Oceanic, Northeast African. Okay. These categories, I would say, really all of us have some sort of percentages in them. And of course, some of us have more than the other. The Western Mediterranean would be the area that you would call the Iberian Peninsula. It peaks in the area of Sardinia. Some of your audience would notice that they're getting maybe 1% Sardinian and those kind of results. I have to tell you, those are not new. Those are ancient markers. And, you know, it's unfortunate I can't show the screen, because when you do other tests like My True Ancestry, that's archaeogenetic site. It's more fun, but it has truth inside of it as well. Because when you upload your raw data to that site, and they have different sites all over the planet, Europe, North Africa, the so-called Middle East, Asia, India, and they match your bones, your DNA to the bones of these different sites. What we end up seeing is that a lot of our people have matches to the ancient Carthaginian sites, okay? And I'm bringing that up for a reason, because the Carthaginians came back and forth to this land. And when they originally are Northeast African. So if you look at from the area we now call Lebanon. So when you look at Lebanese today and you look at their results, because they were invaded by the Turks who were in their land for 600 years. Now they've pretty much become a very fair complected people. So they don't look like their original ancestors, but if you look at many of their DNA, some of them will have, let's say, 0.1, 0.2% Northeast African, which would be maybe Eritrean, Somalian, okay? That is really a vestige of their original ancestors. And now I am bringing that up because 23andMe now has something called the V5 chip. I believe that's what it's called. So many people are resubmitting their DNA, and they're seeing this 0.2 Eritrean, some of our people, not all of them, 0.1% Somalian. And you're saying like, well, where would I get Somalian and Eritrean DNA from? Very simple. You're getting it from the Carthaginians. And they did come back and forth and intermingle with us quite a bit. So when they went to these different areas, beyond the country we now call Lebanon, they established city-states all across, from Cyprus, all across North Africa, Tunisia, which was the old Carthage, all up, you know, they set up a colony in the Iberian Peninsula, Marseille, southern France, Sardinia, Sicily, Venice, Greece, pretty much all throughout the Mediterranean. So they took on that DNA as well. And when they came into the Eastern Woodland area, and there you can find Punic writing as far out as west as the area we call Oklahoma. And when they came and intermixed with us, they brought that DNA with us. So this is why some of your listening audience will notice that 0.2% Italian that they, you know, on 23andMe. Some people are noticing the Greek and the Balkan. I see that on some of the people from the Caribbean as well. And that gets a little tricky too, because what happens also during the 1490s, when you had the dispersion of the Moors and the Sephardic Jews out of Europe, they came into the Caribbean, and they also came into the East Coast of the United States. And we also got the DNA from them. So I've looked at plenty of people, let's say from Jamaica, and I would look at their secondary populations on GEDmatch kits, and you'll see South Italy and all these little markers. And where are they getting that from? Because the DNA doesn't go anywhere. And that, that DNA is coming from when they were running for their lives, Sephardic Jews and Moors and those individuals were leaving Europe in droves, and they came over here. This was around the period of Columbus or shortly before it. And that DNA shows in our people. But I wanted to show some of this because that DNA is not new. So if you're just looking at your classic European DNA on your conventional tests and you don't look beyond what they are telling you, you're just going to see the English and the Irish, okay? But that's not all we have, because when you look at other third-party tests, you see we have a decent amount of Mediterranean DNA. Some of it around the time of Columbus, some of it right after Columbus, because the Spaniards actually came into the Southeast as well. And I will tell you, it complicates the picture because some of that Asian Native American DNA we have is from South America. And it came here from the Spaniards' mestizo sons who were with them on their expeditions and mixed in with our people. So some of us, when we do these other tests, because DNA is like any other science, it improves over time. So that's why I want our people to stop saying, oh, it's garbage, it's this. Now, I'm not suggesting that you base your identity on DNA. Good old-fashioned genealogy is still the mainstay. And I was telling Phoenix earlier, I see genealogy the same way I was trained as a physician. I was trained that a good physician who's a good diagnostician should be able to hit that diagnosis about 80% of the time, and that MRIs, X-rays, and serology tests only adds to fine-tuning it. But you should pretty much know what you're dealing with based on a good history and a physical and your ability to elicit the information from the patient plus your examination. And I see the same thing when it comes to researching our people's information. So by no means do I want people to think that I think ancestral DNA tests should substitute genealogy. No, what it should do is just fine tune. Now, I can't screen share right now, but I want to jump on the
we can see it.
Dr. Fatu, we can see it now.
Yeah, we can see you now.
Oh, when did this happen?
Probably like 5 minutes ago.
Man,
it just magically showed up.
No,
yeah.
You were totally on point, and we were following along. So we just didn't feel a need to stop you because you were swag surfing.
Oh, all right. So this is my mom's, and I just wanted people to see, this is a very classic type of this is the Eurogenes 13. The North Atlantic would be pretty much DNA out of Northwest Europe, English, Irish, Scottish, French, Baltic, the Baltic areas would be somewhat like Central Europe. Not Central Europe, pardon me. I believe the Scandinavian and Finnish. Then you have the Western Mediterranean. I was talking about that. You will notice that any of our people that participate with GEDmatch, everyone gets these. It just may not be in the same percentages. My mom's people, they're from Northeast North Carolina, and a lot of her ancestors, when you trace it, came out of the Virginia area. So I find that, the Iberian component tends to be higher, and a lot of people that come there because they're from the coastal areas, and so the whole world just came in on them. But I don't care if you're from Louisiana or from Tennessee, that Western Mediterranean is here because, as I said before, that also came with the Carthaginians who carried DNA here. So, West Asian would be the area that we're now, West Asia would be like the area of the Caucasus Mountains, the area of Georgia. Then you have Eastern Mediterranean, that would be the people out of like Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and you will see Red Sea. Red Sea is the area that's pretty much like Yemen, Saudi, the area around Egypt that we know today. You have South Asian. Some of our people have more South Asian than others. Then, of course, you have the East Asian. And then you have the Amerindian, which is a type of East Asian. And some people have more Northeast African, all right? And those of us that have more Northeast African will elicit probably a little bit of Eritrean, Somalian and things of that nature. Okay. Hold
Doctor, do
on.
you mind if I add something to that?
Sure.
Well, some of that Western, I guess the Western Mediterranean and Northern Africa, and some of those are based on the oral history that the Ojibwe and other Algonquian tribes have of migrating
Is the audio
over
out?
there. Excuse me, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
I can hear you. I can hear
Yeah.
Tasha. Yeah.
So we have oral history among some of the Algonquin tribes of people from here migrating over to those areas in the Mediterranean and Northern Africa thousands of years ago. And Jack D. Forbes actually has a book going into details about that. And then there's another member of the Ojibwe tribe that also has a book talking about that as well. So these DNA results are giving validation to those oral stories too.
Absolutely.
And they were sent to the Mediterranean as well, and Northern Africa as well, right? During King Philip's War, those were the other places.
Oh,
The
yes.
Asian,
They were
Mediterranean,
sent
Iberian
to,
Peninsula.
yes,
Yes,
Seville, Spain. But going back to what Tasha was saying about what Jack D. Forbes talked about, I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I do not know a people on this planet who will literally have the DNA markers of all these individuals. I mean, we are matching everyone. And I've had people, in these genetic groups who are not from, people from Europe, Eastern Europe, where people into DNA studies say that they're blown at the fact that we literally have markers of everyone in our DNA. This is just one limited set of categories. We literally match everyone. It's like we're the magnet, and we have little dots all over from everyone that came in. And then you have different people that start identifying with the different dots. But I tell people we're none of the dots, we're the magnet. And that is a characteristic we have. So yeah, the DNA supports 100%. And that's what I like. That's, to me, how DNA should be used. It should be used to support the history, because if the history says that we went back and forth from these areas because Algonquian people were seafaring people, as I understand, am I not correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's right.
All right. So if we were seafaring people, that means we went back and forth. Evidently, some of that DNA came back with us. And then we also had these visitors coming here. We had loads of visitors coming here, some of them friendly and some of them not so friendly. But the DNA is there to show. Okay, now I'm going to, hold on. Okay, so, hold on, I'm going to go into, we're going to stay on that particular topic now. Hold on. Okay. Because I like all of this to connect. Okay, so now I'm going into another third-party test. That was just GEDmatch, okay? All right, so now this is something called My True Ancestry. People that play with DNA know about this as well. And this is an archaeogenetic site. Just give it, it's just loading up here. It would take long to load, of course, because I'm anxious to show it. That's how that works. In the meantime, while this is loading, any questions?
You guys have any questions you want to ask? America said, Oselamo. How do you say that? Osalome. Osalome says, America, the true old world. Someone asked, I believe they asked, does this mean indigenous to Earth, period? Like, what do you mean by that? I don't know what they mean by that, but that's one of the questions I saw.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Let me go back up. The chat was moving really fast, so I gotta scroll up. It's kind of far back. Anybody else got any questions or ask that again? Because I got to go through too much. I have to scroll up. This chat's moving kind of fast.
Oh, I see it. It was V. She says, so does this make us the original people of the earth?
All evidence is pointing to that. Because I upload my African relatives' DNA. They gave me access to their DNA and I study it. And they don't have these types of patterns. They are not related to everyone all over the planet. No. Just like the people all over the planet, they're not related to each other. But we're related to everybody.
That is interesting.
So when you look at, this is called My True Ancestry. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay, so now let me share this with you guys.
Okay, we got a question about Albert Perry, but we're going to save that Albert Perry for part 2. We already know there's going to be a part 2.
Yes.
And we're looking to get another special guest here. Albert Perry will be a part of part 2. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me know when you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, it's loading
Yes,
right now.
So you guys see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so hold on. Hold on. Okay, now this is my mom's, and this is her match to Europe, all the archaeogenetic sites. Okay, now hold on. I'm gonna go to the Americas. Hold on. I'm not gonna refresh because that'll just delay things. Okay. Now these are the sites that they have. And as you can see, and this is pretty much any of us that participate, we get this. Some of us light up more sites than others. And I will tell you, the more now this is something that I've observed playing with this a lot. The more European DNA that we have, the less this fills up. The less DNA. So the DNA, if you have more European DNA, it makes this more faded. And if you have less European DNA, this is more filled. So that lets you know these sites, the more ancient they were, the more they had an African type. And I say that in quotes, an African type of DNA, okay? All right, and that would be the Yucatan Peninsula. Okay, now hold on. I want to go here. I want to show you something. This is what I wanted to show. Now, according to this, they said that her closest ancient population would be the Yoruba people of West Africa, right? All right, hold up. And they also mentioned Al-Andalus, based on how she's matching. Okay, now, I want to show something. They recently discovered descendants of people who were enslaved who worked here. But if you looked at here in Maryland, if you read the study and you also looked at their ancestral composition, you would see these people were indigenous as well. But I don't want to, I want to move to something else because we know that, okay? Hold on. This Cameroon is part of that Albert Perry lineage, by the way. We all have this as well, okay? And I'm not going to deal with that today, but it'll be dealt with when we come back, okay? This is what I wanted to show you. This is another deep dive. This is what they call the Saka people. The Saka people would be a type of Turkish people, Asian people, Central Asian people. And when they talk about Native Americans were one type of Asian migration. You had other Asian migrations, and you had Central Asians. And I'm sure some of you heard how when they sampled the DNA of Native Americans, many of them are connected to the Altaic people and the Central Asian people. I'm sure you've heard of that. Some of them, these are the people they're talking about. These people are the Saka people, like that. If you look, okay, it's another type of Asian people, all right? These are all different Asian people, okay? And this is what I wanted to also show you. Remember I mentioned that some of us get tiny markers from Western Mediterranean, or it may show up as 1% Sardinian on Ancestry DNA. This is another match. She matches Carthaginian, Punic, Sardinia, okay? This is from people coming in. If you look here, when you see Tanzania, for those of you who've done 23andMe, you may notice under the Angola or Congo, Angola area, there's a category called Southeast Africa, right? If you look at sequencing, which is unfortunate because they're working on their site, what I wanted to show, and 23andMe has their version of sequencing. I will go back to it and show it to you. You will see that we had Southeast Africans right there merged who came in with the Austronesians into our DNA as well. Okay, and that shows. So in other words, whether it's this test or whether it's another test, they're all lining up. But what do you do with it? Why would someone who's from North Carolina have Neolithic Tanzania matching? Where is it coming from? So you have to start looking at, well, where is it coming from? Some of our people will get Kenya. Some of us will get Tanzania. Some of us will get Malawi. Where is that coming from? That's the Southeast African. But if you look at the sequencing, and I'm going to show you. Hold on.
While she's getting that together, once y'all get things straight, get straightened and get them likes up. It's a lot of people in the building. It should be the same. Match the likes. Share the video, y'all. It ain't gonna hurt nothing. Share the video. And if you haven't signed the petition already, what you waiting on?
All right, so let me share this because I would like our people to see what I'm talking about. All right, hold on. Okay, so I'm gonna share this. Let me know if you see it.
Yes.
Okay, so this is back to 23andMe, and I'm staying on the same topic, okay? I just showed you that my mom had matches to Tanzania. A lot of our people who participate, they get similar results, whether it's to Kenya, to Tanzania. I want you to look at this as a form of sequencing. They're able to tell not so much the timeline is off, okay? But what I want the audience to pay attention to is who came first and who came first into your bloodline and who were they adjacent to. Do you understand what I mean? Now, this is all of us. This is who you are. What you will notice for pretty much the majority of us, this Austronesian marker, remember I said they were the earliest seafarers to come in? You notice it's right down there. These two right here. Who do you see next to them? Southeast African. So that's where that Tanzania and Kenya comes in. And if you just look at the map and think about where Tanzania and Kenya, where they are located, Malawi and all those countries, and you think about where the Philippines and Indonesia and Cambodia and Burma, and you look at that location, you would know in order for the masses of our people to have that combination into their DNA, these people had to cross the Pacific. And if they hit us from the Pacific, we had to be most likely in South America at the time and on the Pacific Rim. It just makes sense.
I need some Funk Master Flex bombs to drop on that one.
Okay. Now, African hunter-gatherer is just a nice, neat way of saying pygmy. Okay, so that's just a sign that the earliest human is inside of her DNA. That just shows the ancientness. Now, Senegambian, that's a little tricky because pretty much whether we're Caribbean, whether we're from North America, we all have a little bit of Senegambian DNA. Now, how the DNA enters, it depends on your particular history. For a lot of us, and it depends on your family, that Senegambian, the Spaniards, who were the earliest, I wouldn't say the earliest, but put it this way, before the British came among us, the Spaniards actually came to the Southeast. That's not talked about a lot, but it should be because they left their genetic imprint there. And I have to tell you, when they came with their Moors, okay? they came with, at this point, they had dominated the North Africans, okay, that were in the Iberian Peninsula. And they went with them. Everywhere the Spaniards went, they took the Moors to assist them. Now, if you look at, just on your own, if you look at a lot of the people's DNA who are of the unmixed population of North Africa and Morocco, many of them have what they term Senegambian and Guinean DNA. It doesn't mean they're from those regions, but they have that DNA. It's very common among them, okay? So that's, you have to look at who was with who. Now, this is a cousin of mine who's from North Carolina. You'll also see Italian there. You will find that you will see Italy among our people as well. That can come from, if you're looking at the sequence. Now, I noticed with her, it's not that early on. Okay, so I'm thinking this is coming from Sephardic Jews and Moors, to be honest with you, only because I'm looking at the sequencing of where it is. Some of our people, it comes almost as early as here. And when you see it there, I can guarantee you it's linked to Sardinia, Sicily, and it's coming from Carthaginians. So you have to look at where these other DNAs are coming in and who they are adjacent to. Now, when you see this indigenous American, which is really the Native Americans, okay, that they are mislabeling as indigenous. When you see that down here, most likely this will be of South American native. And what's happening, and I would have showed it to your audience, but I don't have, they're working on that particular site. A lot of our people also have matches to the South American native tribes, and some of our people will get a hit on Ancestry. I know my cousin's wife, her people, they're from Alabama, and some of them migrated out of North Carolina, and she has what is 1% 1% Venezuelan. Okay, her position, no, that's 1%. That doesn't mean anything. It's not about the percent. What is it even doing there? And if you break down the DNA, you will see she has enough where it elicited that response. It signaled it because she has a decent amount of South American native. Okay, it may not be enough in someone else to signal that, but pretty much a lot of us have it. And a lot of us have it because why? When the Spaniards came into the southeast part of the United States, and pretty much wherever they went, they did not just go alone. They deliberately brought their mestizo sons. That was how they conquered. And of course, their sons intermixed with us, so they carried DNA from other parts of the Americas. That's why we end up having matches to South America and these different places in Latin America as well. Okay. Hold on.
Absolutely incredible.
I'm going to show, I want to show the consistency of this. Hold on. All right, same thing. Now I want to show, this is my, hold on. Okay, let me see. This is another cousin of mine. Hold on. Okay, is that, can that be seen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is another cousin of mine. If you look at the earliest people that came in, now in her case, you see the Manchurian and Mongolian, all right? And you see that next to the Filipino, the Austronesian, and all of this is together. Again, the earliest visitors. So this is just simply reflecting that she also descends from tribes who came out of the Canada area. Because as you know, the Algonquians and the Iroquoians, they extend up into Canada. So those tribes further north were being hit by people who were migrating out of Asia and coming across down Canada. So that's what this is a reflection of. And then this reflects her lineage that came out of South America. These three right here. And then here you go up and you see the Spanish and the Portuguese. Now, remember I mentioned sometimes that Spanish DNA could have been carried to us from the Carthaginians. But in this particular case, I will say, I don't think so, because look who it's next to. And just in my experience, when it's usually sequenced next to this, this is usually a sign that that truly is indeed a more modern day Spaniard, because they often, think of this as an individual. They are often mixed with North Africans. You understand? The Nigerian doesn't necessarily mean it's a person from Nigeria. It could be, because there were slaves that came from enslaved Africans that came from the transatlantic slave trade. But this very well could be an influence from the Caribbean. And we have to understand, okay, and I'm going to get into that. And I wanted to show that with sequencing, really, which is unfortunate I can't show it, but I'll describe what I wanted to show. Hold on a minute. I'm going to show this. Okay. Hold on. All right. Hold on. I'm trying to get a translation here. Some of your listening audience have seen me post a book called Les Berbers en Amérique, okay? And this is basically an old anthropological work published showing how, basically using language, words, how pre-Islamic Berbers intermingled with our people, and they did intermingle heavily with Eastern woodland tribes. That goes back to the global similarity that I showed with the young lady, that feature they no longer show in 23andMe. Remember, she was very globally similar to the Mozabite people of Algeria. Remember that?
You referring to Sheridan, Doc?
I'm sorry?
Are you referring about Sheridan?
Yes, the one about the young lady named Sheridan. Well, there are other tests that show that sort of similarity. And one of the tests, unfortunately, that site is down now, but I wanted the audience to really see that if you look at our people when we participate, you will see that there's a big old circle in North America. That would be our population in terms of global similarity. And then you would see a big old circle in the middle of what we now call Algeria, okay? And then you would see a smaller circle in the area we call Nigeria. Now, people that have less Caribbean intermixtures, let's say maybe someone who did not have enslaved ancestors, or they had enslaved ancestors, like my mother, because some of her ancestors were enslaved, but somehow or another they didn't intermix too much, just a little bit, with Caribbean people. You would see that she has the big old circle in North America because that's who she is. So naturally, she's matched to the test population there that they used, so-called African Americans of Denver. That was their test population. And then you will see the next biggest circle will be in the area that they call Algeria, among the Mozabite people of Nigeria. Now, the sample that is closest to her outside of her own population in North America was an unmixed Mozabite person. That's very important to say because the people today are very miscegenated. Okay, but then you have people in the southern part of Algeria who are virtually not mixed, and that sample population, you would find our people share a lot of genetic similarity to. And then she has the next biggest circle, which is in the area of Nigeria, which isn't too big. Now, people who have more Caribbean lineage or Caribbean people, that circle is bigger in the area of Nigeria. It's smaller in the area of Algeria. Okay. Now, and then when you look at both of us, both Caribbeans and North America, you would see tiny little circles in the area that we call Mexico, and a tiny little areas in the area of Colombia, which was their test population, the country of Colombia, and also in the area of Peru and Bolivia, okay? And little tiny dots throughout the Mediterranean and Europe or whatever. This would be the typical pattern of this is a type of global similarity, but it's found in sequencing.com, where you upload your data and you could pick different apps to do it. Okay, that would be the Map My Genes app. And this is what I would see with both Caribbeans and I would see with Afro-Americans. The only difference being we would have more global similarity with the North Africans, and the Caribbeans would have more global similarity to the Nigerians. Okay, let me explain. That's pre-Columbian. And that's just common sense, because they are adjacent to us. Now, the Austronesian markers may or may not show, and they tend not to show up in Caribbean people. It does not make them less indigenous. Let me emphasize that. It does not make them less indigenous. The reason why it shows up in North Americans, it's simple geography, because those people came to us from the Pacific. People were living in the Caribbean for thousands and thousands of years. They're barricaded by two big land masses. So they're not going to have a preponderance of Austronesian markers. Very simple.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Anybody got any questions? Doctor, did you touch on that Clotilda yet?
No, I didn't touch on that. And I didn't touch on, and I do want to touch on the so-called African-American communities with the ancestry DNA as well.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, so earlier Phoenix and I were chatting about Clotilda, and he was I forgot his name, Cujo. I forgot his last name. Was it Johnson?
I think so.
Okay, Cujo. He was the last African slave. He was taken to Alabama. I think he was from the Benin area. Don't quote me on that, but he was definitely a West African, and he was smuggled in long after importation was abolished. And that happened, and he was carried to Alabama. Now, I tell people my personal feelings about these stories. Number one, it was true. He has descendants, so I'm not here to say that the story wasn't true, but I'm often paranoid as to why it's even being told. And I think it's personally being told because, again, this is all about getting the masses to think that's their story. Okay, it is not. And I was telling Phoenix, if you just use logic, right? Let's think about it. When you read about Mr. Cujo and what he describes when he came in and he was among the other people, okay, the other so-called Negro population, African Americans, what they're calling us now, he basically socialized and went among other continental Africans. They established a town called Africa Town. He married a continental African woman. He had children, and my understanding, his sons, if not all of them, most of them married women who were also African descendants. Okay, very clear African descendants. They were one generation removed. So I said to Phoenix that let's just use logic. If he basically went among people who were only 1, 2, or 3, 4 generations removed from Africa, why did he feel a need to look for other Africans to hang around? These people weren't that removed from Africa. And the answer is very simple, because he wasn't among Africans predominantly. He had to search for his own to feel comfortable, because clearly the people that was around him, they had a similar phenotype. It wasn't even exact, a similar phenotype, meaning that they were melanated, they had maybe Afro-textured hair, but they were not the same people, because those people would have been descendants of Creeks, Chata, and different tribes. Whether they knew it or not is another issue, but that's who they were descendants of. And he couldn't relate to them, just like they couldn't relate to him. So this is why he married the woman he married, and his sons saw fit to marry descendants one generation removed from the African continent as well. And I saw that off the back.
Someone is asking if the doctor could explain monolid eyes and epicanthal folds, since the tongue was excellently explained.
If I can explain those findings among our people. Oh, I see. I wonder if Doctor could explain mongoloid eyes since the tongue was excellently explained. Yeah, there are 2 reasons we can have those findings. A lot of our people, you had the Khoisans that was here as well. And, a famous Khoisan was Nelson Mandela, meaning in terms of the category of people that he belonged to. And as you can see, they have an Asiatic look. So a lot of our people also descend from those type of people. They were a global people as well. They're not just specific to the African continent, because when you map out Khoisan people using another type of third-party test, you will see that they light up ancient sites in the Americas. So we can take on that look as well.
Oh, Say that again. Say that again.
Yes. Okay. So what happens with my true ancestry is that if you move up higher, if you purchase a higher level, this allows you to purchase kits. Like they have ancient DNA kits like Khoisan kit, a pygmy kit. They have like the Carthaginian kits. They have different kits that you can purchase. And this comes with moving up higher if you pay for it, higher up the level. So if you take these kits and you download it, you can map it out like the same way I mapped out my mother's DNA for the Americas and for Europe and Africa. You could do the same thing with these kits. If you take a Khoisan kit, which I have, and you map it out, you will see they light up all the ancient sites in the Americas. Meaning that in these sites all over the Americas, their basal DNA had Khoisan in it, regardless of how they looked. And the Khoisans looked Asiatic. Then, of course, you had the modern day Asians coming in on us, the people that we're terming Native Americans, they came in. You have the Central Asians, they came in, and they had those characteristics as well. But they are not of the original Khoisan. They are a mixture of those Khoisans and newer derived groups. But yes, they came in and we also end up resembling them. So there's two reasons we can have those epicanthic fulls that we have. I mean, there are Africans that have that as well, by the way. I mean, and they're not even Khoisan. I've seen West Africans with that. East Africans. Any more questions? Should I move on to the African American communities?
Yeah, you can definitely move on to that. You can show that, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, American Harris, some of you've heard of her. Somebody put me on to her particular video where she dealt with that. And I showed it to Tyrone Lewis Cannon, and he agreed 100% that definitely was the way ancestry. Basically, they went back and they looked at everyone who participated DNA, because so many of us participate, and they basically divided our communities into different regions based on common shared ancestry, according to them going back 200 to 300 years. Well, it turns out that if you pay attention to those communities, that's actually where your ancestors' tribal areas was, without a shadow of a doubt. And so a lot of people who start getting into genealogy, once they now realize they are American Indian, the next question becomes, well, what tribes do I descend from? Some people really don't know. Okay. That's an excellent tool, and it is very accurate. So, when Tasha Chi showed me her results and I was looking at it, one of the things that I noticed among her different so-called, I hate the term, but that's what they call it, African American communities. One of her communities was the Tidewater area of Virginia. And that's just right on point, because I know among the several tribes, one of the main tribes that she descends from would be the Pamunkey, also known as Powhatan, and the Mattaponi tribe. And they came out of that area. And I was also telling you earlier that my uncle and my mom, they are full siblings. However, my uncle has a community my mother doesn't. And I noticed that. And it's the early Maryland, Carolina, Virginia area. Now, the fact that my uncle has that community and my mother doesn't, what that told me was that evidently he inherited that from some ancestor a little further out. Because what you may or may not know, when you have a sibling, you do not inherit the same percentages from your each of your ancestors as the other one. So you may inherit a little bit more from your great-great-grandfather, and your sibling may inherit just a little less, but your sibling may inherit from a great-great-grandmother from another side a little bit more than you. It is completely random, and it's not something that can be predicted. So
my twin sister and I would have different markers as well.
Right, because your sister, when you start going beyond your great-grandparents, your sister very well can inherit something that you wouldn't inherit, because maybe she grabbed it a little bit more from one parent who, you understand, is completely random. So when I look at, that's why I like to test multiple people, even though they might be siblings, because that's something that my uncle showed, my mother didn't. So that means that community is coming a little further out, and my mother didn't capture it. So now I had to put on my thinking cap and say, well, what's going on? So remember, I told you that majority of the work comes from genealogy. Okay, so I shared with you that I found, well, really with the help of someone who's a researcher. She's an older lady, and she was a historical, she was a history teacher, and she, in her retirement, she does a lot of genealogy research for people, and she did a lot of research for many members of the Halawasaponi Nation and Meherrin, and just different people, even non-members. Okay, so she's very knowledgeable, and she's from the area, so she knows these names, she knows these families like the back of her hand, and she's very, very comfortable moving through the census records and the different categories. She moves through it naturally. She doesn't know anything about DNA, but she said, I could tell you about the records. And, so she saw that my great-great-grandmother, going up straight my maternal line, was on the 1850 census. Now, she told me, that's your great-great-grandmother. And I told her, no, it isn't, because they had her listed as white. All the people that she was surrounded with was white. And when I traced them out, they were, as far as I'm concerned, undoubtedly white. Their descendants are white. So I said, that's just someone else with her name. And she insisted that was her. And I said no, but nevertheless, I did my tree, and I claimed her as my great-great-grandmother, but I'll be honest, I didn't believe she was. I just left it there. And I'm actually glad I did, because 2 years after that, apparently the little boy next to her, because she was 10 years old, according to that census in 1850, there was a little boy next to her. Evidently, one of his descendants also put up that tree leading back to that house, and he ended up matching to both my mother and her brother. So that confirmed that indeed was my mother's great-grandmother. So once I saw the genetic evidence of that, I called her back and I apologized. And she said to me, well, it was okay because you needed to determine that for yourself. But she said, I don't need DNA because I know the history, and I know the land, and I know the communities. And I knew that was your great-great-grandmother. And she said, so now that you and I agree that that is your great-great-grandmother, she said, I'm going to tell you another thing. Now, she used the word Native American because she didn't understand the difference between who's Native American, who's indigenous, and all of that. She used the term Native American. She said, so now I know that she was a free person of color. She was in Granville County. So I can tell you right now, this lady was a Native American. And if she's coming out of Granville, most likely she belonged to that nation today. Their descendants are called Halawasaponi. And then she left it at that. That's where, so I would say she did 80%. Just based on her ability to navigate the records and understanding the history and understanding the communities back then and understanding the surnames and everything like that. So this is where doing the DNA comes in, because now I needed to see how can she belong to that nation when I was familiar with the surname. So this comes into where Tasha Chi talks about the surnames. She talks about the different surnames associated with the different tribes. This is very, very important when you start doing genealogical research. So I was familiar with the surnames that are associated with the nation that they call Halawa Saponi. And I would type those names into the search bar. And I was not closely related to them. My mother was not closely, I would say my mother and my uncle, because that's the DNA I was using. Neither one of them was closely related to those members. They were distant. And what I paid attention to was the common relations. I would use the shared relatives feature, which is an important feature to use. And I noticed nobody that descended from her great grandmother, many of those relatives now in Texas, nobody was related to those Halawa Saponi. Now they were, but it was very distant, and it was always from another line. So I knew that she was not coming from that nation. She was coming from another nation. So now I had to start putting on my thinking cap. Okay, so now evidently she's coming from a different nation and not the main nation that was in that area at the time. And it took me a while, but then I started looking at that Maryland, Virginia, Carolina community that my uncle has. And then I started noticing that he was matching people named Proctor. Now I started clicking on the Proctors, and every time I would click on a Proctor, I look at the shared relatives, and then boom, I would see Swan, I would see Butler, Thompson, and then I would click on the Swans, and then I would see the Proctors pop up. And then I started realizing, wait a second, all of these people are clearly related, because when you pop on one, you see a bunch of people with the surnames. Then I started looking at those of them that created a tree, which many of them did, thank goodness. And I started looking at their trees, and lo and behold, I saw the same names on both sides of their trees. Pardon me. So then that told me their forefathers were practicing endogamy, basically kin marrying kin, which was a clue to a lot of our people who belonged to the free people of color. They were indigenous people, but they belonged to the free people of free people classification. They were trying to keep things to themselves, so they cousins were marrying cousins. They were keeping it in the same bloodlines. Okay, so I said, okay, so now I started looking up who were these Proctors, who were these Swans, who were these Butlers and Savoys. And lo and behold, it showed that they came out of that DMV area, and many of them belonged to the nation we call Piscataway. Now came the question. So clearly, both my mother and my uncle are related to these people, and they share some common ancestry with this family, albeit distant. So now, which one of my ancestors came from it? So when I started to look at the relatives I shared in common with those collection of names, they all were descendants of my great-great-grandparents who came out of Granville. So now that left me, was it my great-great-grandmother or was it my great-great-grandfather? This is exactly how I did it. And so I ended up having a relative who belonged to the Saponi Nation, who was related to my great-great-grandmother. And what I realized, the ancestry we shared in common, even though he's a melanated being just like we are, the ancestors that made us related was actually the European side. So now that eliminated him, and he wasn't matching to the Proctors and the Savoys and the Swans. So then I looked at a person who was related to my great-great-grandfather's side, and she was from his brother. And I looked at our common relations, and she was not related. So by process of elimination, I knew that it was from my great-great-grandmother, and it came from her maternal lineage. Okay? So those communities are very accurate in terms of delineating maybe not the exact tribe, but you know the tribes that were in that region. Absolutely, it's very accurate. Any questions?
That's incredible. Are there any questions?
I was just going to say I descend from butlers and proctors out of that same area. Out of the same from the first people that the people that settled there and married into the Piscataway families.
Okay.
This is absolutely amazing. Dr. Fatou, I am so glad you pulled up. Whenever you're ready for part 2, we'll keep unpacking. This was absolutely awesome. This is dope. I'm thanking you so much. Thanking you in advance for unpacking this with us.
Oh, absolutely. I enjoy it. I hope your listening audience learned. I hope that they will look at the DNA test differently. I hope it motivates those that are interested in doing the DNA to just not take it at its face value and be active participants, pardon me, in playing with it and participating in third-party tests, downloading it, and learning from themselves. Because just looking at it and learning and comparing it with other people is what gives you the insight.
Yes, indeed. All things considered. So now you'll also have a tool for identifying for the people that have already done the DNA. Now you know what you're looking at. You have something to work with to help you do your interpretation and also narrow down your trial. I want to thank you so much, Fatu. We look forward to having you again. Hopefully we can get Mr. Cannon as well. That would be epic. That would absolutely be epic. Dari, Tasha, Dr. Fontaine, did any of you guys have any questions for Dr. Fatu?
No, I just appreciate her insight, and I appreciate you for creating the space.
It was my pleasure to be here, and I enjoy doing this. I enjoy teaching out people who they are, and I want them to be confident in their identities. And they don't need to run from DNA. I think sometimes our people run from the DNA. I know some people, rightfully so, are paranoid about sharing their DNA, but I also pick up a lot of our people also run from it because they don't know how to interpret it. They think that by the labeling of our DNA being African somehow or another, it takes away from their true identities and lineage here. And I want them to not be afraid of it and understand that it doesn't change anything. It doesn't take away the fact that they have an ancient lineage here that they need to be proud of. And I just want them to understand the tricks of the trade of the DNA, how to interpret it, and not run away from it. Because if you run away from it, it gives a false impression that you don't want to be who you really are. No, you are who you are. And I just wanted them to understand that there is some truth to it, but there's also a little game playing with it. So I wanted them to understand that as well. So they're not in the dark. Whether they choose to use DNA or whether they choose not to participate with DNA is totally up to them. But I just didn't want them to have people use that or weaponize that against them, because I also seen people weaponize that against us. Well, show us your DNA. I've seen non-Indigenous people do that. Show us your DNA.
Right now. I invited her over, but she's just like, show me your DNA. I don't care. You pretendians make me sick.
Yeah. Well, I'll show you my DNA. Now show me yours.
I asked her if she had the records to match. She said, I have a genetic report, and that's what you need to be Indian.
Mm-hmm. Well, show me your Austronesian markers, because my markers are more ancient than yours.
Okay.
Yeah, I could throw it right back to them. I got your people in me, and I got people more ancient who came here before you. You're high up on my list of newcomers. I got people who were here a coming to visit me older. I mean, we could play it back, but you can't, you know, as Tyrone Lewis Cannon says it, you got to be in it to win it. That's his quote. So people could throw that to you because they know that too many of our people are running from it. It's like they see the African DNA and they want to run. I don't need to run. I don't need to run from the African DNA. I could prove I have that DNA. It's exaggerated. I could prove that the markers that they're using exaggerated, but yeah, I have some of it, absolutely. Just like they have some of it. Some of that DNA doesn't change their identity and it doesn't change ours neither.
That's right. I know that's right. This was such a fire build. I thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up. Whenever you're ready, Fatu, you know we're going to roll out the red carpet. The floor will be yours all over again. Thank you so much. Everybody, again, the petition is scrolling across at the bottom. Check out the replay. Smash the like button. Smash the subscribe button. Hit that share button. Send this somewhere. Send it everywhere. If every last one of the 120 people share, that's a lot of people that's going to be reached. A lot of people that we can have these different conversations about DNA with, especially when it comes down to the American Indian ancestry and being able to now use the documentation to support the DNA. Very important findings laid out here. And this was, she laid it out quite perfect. Anybody will be able to understand that. So now these DNA bullies, I'm telling y'all better fall back, right? Let's work on the records because that's what really is going to make a lot of this stick. Fatu, did you have any closing words?
No, I'm really happy you had me here, Phoenix, and it's a pleasure. I can't thank you enough that I'm able to share this information. I hope this gives more confidence to your listening audience that DNA is not contradictory to their ancient lineage here. If anything, it supports it. And that's what I want to emphasize. So I appreciate being an invited guest on your show. And I'm looking forward to continuing to learn and come back and share whatever I learn more and more with your audience.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Dr. Fontaine, David, and Tasha, thank you so much for helping me co-host. Means so much that you guys were on the panel with us as well. Everybody in the chat, y'all take care of yourselves. Make sure y'all drink plenty of water. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We're going to be all right. It's a beautiful day in Indian country. Peace a lot, Shike.
Peace. Thanks, Phoenix. Thanks.